Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CEOs, CROs, and CMOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Isabelle Papoulias, a fractional go-to-market leader and business operations executive. Hey, Isabelle, welcome to the podcast.
Ken, hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited. We met just a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, and it seems like we're birds of a feather and a lot of ideas, and looking forward to a great episode with you. But before we dig in, love you to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, your new business as a fractional SaaS GTM and operations leader, and a little about your history.
Yes, well, thank you. And you did a great job introducing me. Thanks. I'm a go-to-market leader and business operations executive. I've worked at large, big, and small companies, VC, PE, backed, public, you name it, across different industries. The last 9 years, I've been in the SaaS world, mostly in sales tech, MarTech, and more recently, cybersecurity, in various roles across sales and account management and marketing and business operations. So I've seen the view from different angles of the organization. I recently started fractional engagements. I'm looking for a full-time role, but there's clearly a need right now for fractional work across the spectrum of go-to-market. And so it's a new thing. It's for cybersecurity clients primarily, but I'm also working with a couple of local marketing agencies, in fact. And I tend to work with smaller companies on between 5 and 50 million. And I like to come in at the between 10 and 20 million range, because that's usually, from my experience, where the CEO is looking for more strategic focus and the operational rigor to be built in order to scale much further, right? And I'm a builder. I'm usually hired to build a function from scratch. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. I think that size company is where they start to get complex enough to really need that rigor, right? So it's
Correct.
not just the demand of the CEO for scalability, it's also like a survival thing. You get to 20 million or more, even up to 20 million, you're starting to break the systems that existed before.
Right, and that's where the product marketing fit starts to shape up. And then operational processes and playbooks help to drive the behaviors that the CEO wants to see.
When we did a prep session, we talked about the role of a chief commercial officer in conjunction with the trend of marketing more often reporting to a CRO. That's the first time I've heard those two things put together. So I'm wondering what you see going on here. Do you consider it a healthy development?
Yes, so interesting to hear it was the first time you heard it, because I feel like that's a very topical conversation right now. I'm excited to dig into this. I don't think there's a perfect answer as to whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing. I think it depends on how you define the CRO or the role of the CRO or chief commercial officer, whether it's what I call a true CRO, meaning someone who owns all of the revenue streams, not just the head of sales. And I feel like many times the CRO title is a reference to the head of sales. It also depends on what's your objective with the head of marketing in the organization. What are you trying to do depending on the stage you're in, right? So are you really looking for a full stack marketer? Are you looking to build a marketing function and really start working on understanding the market and building the brand to create awareness and positive predisposition to then drive demand? Or are you actually looking for a field marketer that's reporting to the head of sales, that's doing some very basic support for the sales team, right? A few co-marketing events and so on, right? And then what kind of knowledge does this person have? Does a CRO or chief commercial officer, have they led marketing teams before, or have they been in a marketing role? Have they been in the customer success role, or have they only been in new business sales? And so depending on what all of this is, it may or may not make sense. I think if it checks all these boxes, so if what you're looking to do is to truly start building the marketing function, if that person has been in multiple seats of the go-to-market, then I think there's a lot of benefits to having marketing report to them. One of them is alignment. I just think it's better alignment across the three teams, right? Especially sales and marketing, right? Let's talk about new business. Let's focus on that new. I think even with the best intentions, with the best sales leader, the best marketing leader, folks that know that they're better together than they are alone, look, it's not always easy to have alignment, right? And there's different opinions. And when we report to the CEO is often too busy managing the board and managing investors and the financials and so on. So at a basic level, I think a role like the CCO can drive better alignment, but can drive actually speed of execution, even at practical levels. Like the meeting doesn't get canceled because you're looking for the CEO that's out there chasing some fires. And then someone like a CCO, again, that's been a marketing leader before, a sales leader before, is going to be a great sounding board for you because they've been in your shoes before. A CEO hasn't always been in a marketer's shoes. Most of the time, in fact, they have not. Most CEOs, and again, I'm speaking specifically to the B2B tech ecosystem, smaller companies, right? It's a bit of a different animal. Most of them come from the product side, right? They're founders. They came up with a product idea, and then so there are advantages. And I think overall, I think it's a good thing. Again, assuming that the previous things we talked about check out.
So are you interchangeably using CCO and CRO?
For purposes of this conversation, I am.
Okay, great.
Again, if it's the head of sales that only has sales experience, does not have prior marketing experience or broad go-to-market experience, I'm not sure that's the best fit. But I would say the same thing for a marketer. If you've only been in marketing, I'm not sure that it's the best route to have you be a CCO. And most people I see, because it's starting to happen, we're starting to see more of that role. And sometimes it's called chief growth officer, chief strategy officer, or whatever. So let's say it's the generalist go-to-market. So we're starting to see that role being created. And from what I'm seeing right now, those are usually folks that have sat in different go-to-market seats across the organization. And I think that's a great evolution.
Yeah, I do too. And I think the other thing, I agree with you that a lot of the CEOs are not necessarily even SaaS business model experts. They're subject matter expert. That's why they founded a business. They saw a problem, they went to go solve it. They may not be great CEOs, so they have a conversation with the head of sales and they give them one set of tasks. Then they have a conversation with the marketing leader, and that person gets something slightly different, and that starts the ball rolling on the lack of alignment, right? So if we put all the revenue in one place under a CRO, CCO, that person, that executive can orchestrate those three things to the goals of the organization. And then we don't get misalignment on new logo versus revenue, right? Because they're all the same. And it's the CRO's job to figure out how do we get to the revenue and profitability objectives soonest.
And I think, just to be clear, I think what doesn't work, or probably wouldn't work, again, nothing is black or white, right? Everything is gray, is what you see a lot today, especially in smaller companies, is a head of marketing position being advertised as reporting to the CRO, which in smaller companies is usually the head of sales. And let's be honest, those head of marketing roles are not head of marketing roles. They're basically mid-level field marketing or demand generation, right? And again, if it goes back to the objectives, if that's the role that you want out of marketing and it's pretty tactical, then it's probably fine to have them report to the head of sales, but it will not be a head of marketing. It will not be a CMO. It will not be someone with a lot of experience. It will be a mid-level marketer, right? So I think there are nuances. So I'm just going on a riff here, right? I was at a conference, I think a week or two ago, and Kate Bullis, who's a very well-known recruiter, was on a panel talking about this and the CCO, CRO marketing relationship and pros and cons. And she said something interesting that stuck with me, right? So if there is a CCO and they're responsible for the revenue stream, and let's call it the path to revenue, in her mind, it might be problematic if marketing reports to that person, because then we're making marketing all about revenue and we're stripping away the market work and the brand work. But I actually, as I've been thinking about this, where I'm landing is, if you do have a head of revenue, in some ways, it actually enables marketing to have more time to really keep their finger on the pulse of the market and also be a lot more creative, because that's not the job of the chief revenue officer. I don't know if that makes sense, if it's too philosophical. But again, a lot of these conversations are ongoing, and I have thoughts in my head that are not completely crystallized yet, but I thought that discussion and the points she brought up were interesting. So I think it's mostly positive, and it will open up opportunities for marketers.
I think I agree with you. My perspective is that when you have a true CRO, they have to be thinking monthly, quarterly, annually, 2 or 3 years out, right? They have to be thinking that way. So they're going to task their organization beneath them to achieve those goals in those kind of timeframes. And once they get past the quarter, they have to start thinking about what is the trajectory of the organization. And that trajectory is not sales meetings held, right? Or proposals generated. It's what is our place in the market and what can I do to make the job of my sellers easier? And once they get to that last question, how can I make my seller's job easier? Then they start looking at what is the brand about? Mm-hmm. How are we perceived in the market? Do people look to us when they know they have a problem that they think we might be able to solve? And so I think it's actually a very healthy dynamic as long as the CRO has that kind of head and the people who directly report to him or her are able to grasp that same dynamic.
Exactly, 100%. So the way I would summarize it is if it's done right, meaning for the right reasons and with the right people in place, it's probably a very good model. More to follow, right? Again, this is a new configuration. We'll see.
So I'm kind of drilling down on one aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
How does the head of marketing, CMO, marketing function leader, whatever we want to call those people in the future, how do they benefit from this? And maybe what do they need to do to capitalize on this opportunity? So what do you think's out there?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on this a little bit already, right? I think in many ways the benefits are very practical. Like I said, things can move faster, decisions can be made more quickly because you're not chasing the CEO. And I don't mean this, I say this with a lot of respect for CEOs, but like I said, when they're responsible for go-to-market, the truth is they're also responsible for many other things. And it's just at a basic level, hard to get them, right? So I think there's speed of decision-making, which means speed of execution, alignment between sales and marketing and customer success when a decision has to be made. There's one leader at that point. And so if there's, in the cases where there is disagreement, we don't have endless debates. Someone makes a decision, right? And then the rest, we disagree and commit at one point, right? So I think at a basic level, it's practical benefits. But then, like we said, there's also other benefits, like you have a sounding board, possibly someone who has more experience than you, right? You may be able to learn a thing or two, right? Maybe you have to worry less about all the in the weeds details of revenue because someone else is doing it. So you're garnering the insights that are enabling you to be more effective in your marketing decisions and more creative. So I think it's those types of things.
Yeah, I think there's also the opportunity to get closer to these other job functions. You talked about if you're going to be the CRO, you have to have sat in more of these seats. Certainly, if you can't sit in the seat, at least you can get closer to the work.
That's a great point. I had not thought about that.
Yeah, have a better understanding of it.
I like that a lot.
Early in my career, I carried a bag. I had a quota. I was commissioned. And you never forget how hard that really is if you've ever done it. Maybe the next best thing is being right next to the person doing that work. And
it's the hardest job in the organization. I mean, we all have hard jobs. Product does, marketing does, CS does, sales does, but I do think that ultimately the person that carries the bag and puts up with the stress of the last week of the quarter.
Yeah, they don't call them warriors for nothing. But on a related note, you said to me, I think the first time we met, that pipeline is a team sport. That seems to be one of your mantras. What do you mean by that?
I'm pretty sure it's not mine only. It's a team sport because we've all seen what the buying cycle looks like, right? Where are we now at this point? 27 touch points. 5 years ago was 5. I don't know. The number changes every week. It goes up, right? Between the time a potential buyer starts to realize they have a pain that is big enough that they want to solve it, right? To the time that they actually make a decision to buy, they're engaged in multiple ways. And some of those ways are marketing, right? And some of those ways are sales. There are sales meetings. There's BDR outreach. There's marketing activations, they're reading content, they're visiting the website, they're coming to events. If you show this to a board, you take a recently closed win and put up the buying life cycle on a slide from day one all the way to close with all the touch points, the 27, might be more than that. I think that's a great illustration how truly it's a team sport. Like you didn't build that pipe and you didn't close that deal alone. And I guess this is also where it gets to attribution, because attribution is a nice word, but we all know it's fuzzy. And yes, there's methodologies and there's tech to help us and single touch, multi-touch, all those things. But in the end, it's fuzzy, right? And one of my aha moments was several years back, was in a board meeting where one of our board members said, well, why are you guys fighting over pipeline? Like it's one pipeline. We should have one view of the pipeline. I don't care whether it's come from marketing or from sales, right? And because we had gotten to the point, and I'm sure it wasn't just us, where when you set targets individually for pipe creation by team, in my experience, you're hurting the alignment of the collaboration. And I've seen it where literally sales and the channel team and marketing then are all fighting over the pipeline attribution. This wasn't really your opportunity, marketing. You didn't create this. I did because I talked to them 2 years ago or whatever the thing is. And I opened this opportunity, right? So it doesn't matter. And what we want is enough pipe to enter the quarter to hit our revenue targets in long term. And so that's what I mean by team sport. Now, it's good to know after the fact you analyze and you want to have the insights, you want to know where pipe came from, what channels are working. But for me, it's as a way to optimize your budgets and your channels and your go-to-market, right? BDRs are doing this, it's working really well, let's have them do more, right? For example. So it's for optimization purposes, not for everybody has targets and you need to come up with this pipe. And if you don't come up with it, then you're losers. I don't think that's, and yet many companies build their pipeline targets that way. So I would say, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I think looking at common targets, especially across sales and marketing, I've seen that work very well. In my experience, and part of how we've implemented targets in the companies I worked with is marketing has been measured on half pipeline creation, half revenue creation, but not marketing source. Again, going back to it's a team sport. Total pipeline creation for the quarter, total revenue creation for the quarter. Why? Because again, we're all working together. We're all impacting the buyer experience. So let's get measured on the totality of what we create, right? And I know sales has commissions and such, and they should. It's the hardest job on the market, like I said. But I wonder if they should have those common metrics on top of it. And then you can throw in CS as well, because again, it can be total pipe, including expansion and everything else. So I think that we're at a point where there's so much change in the marketing world and how buyers are engaging and buying and the tech and whatnot, that it would serve us well to rethink how we measure the success of our go-to-market. And that's a big thought and maybe provocative, but I'm thinking a lot about this. And again, I think it's a moving target because there's so much change in what we do today.
Speaking of change, you also gave me a radical idea about, obviously not the first time it's been discussed, but doing away with commissions. And I think that's a little controversial. I don't know if the top 10% of salespeople would love this idea, but what's the benefit to salespeople and the employers, and where?
Yeah, I remember this came up and it was just an idea, right? So again, the context was, how do we create targets that are common to all go-to-market teams to drive certain behaviors? That was like that was a provocative idea, but that was not a must do this, remove all commissions, right? It was just brainstorming. That's not me backpedaling, but it just really just came out of that context. I personally don't think that's the right idea, but I think it's that plus, right? It's like, fine, you should get your commissions, plus maybe you should also be spiffed on total pipeline and revenue created holistically across the organization.
I keep running into this one in client situations. So I want your advice. So my question is, can we call lead generation dead for enterprise sales? Do we need to call it something else? And how is this playing out where you operate? Because I'm really struggling with this. Everybody, like, they nod their head in one meeting about the measures of success in the enterprise sale. And then I get into another meeting And I need to justify every activity I'm doing with some measured number of leads that come out. And these are the same people in the same meetings a couple days apart. So how do
Oh,
we?
the same people in the same meetings. Okay, this is it. It makes it even more interesting. So I'm going to start by saying this is interesting because I hate the word lead gen. I actually don't use it. And when people on my team use it, I correct them. It's a pet peeve for me because I think it waters down the work that we're doing. And it makes the conversations very tactical. I've been in board meetings where they wanted to see MQLs. And I was like, what? So eventually I gave them the MQLs, but I put them in the appendix.
I just
And
thought
it actually
that
worked.
whole thing dead.
That actually worked. No, but hold on. So and the reason I say that is because it focuses the conversation on the wrong thing. And leads are it's a leading indicator and an early leading indicator at that, right? So I'm not saying don't ever look at them. But again, it shouldn't be a target as much as something you look at after to inform what you do. I like to think as marketing in general as a combination of demand creation and demand capture.
Yeah, me too.
Right? And so when you think about it that way, it covers the entire marketing portfolio, right? So demand creation is really all the tactics and you're deploying to generate awareness and reputation, positive predisposition, right? So capture is by the time they know you and they feel good about you, there's enough interest and they're ready to come to you, you're deploying tactics that allow you to catch them, right? But you're actually deploying the same, and I was thinking about this morning, you're actually using the same tools within the marketing toolkit, right, to do that. But it's digital marketing and it's content creation and it's PR and all those things. But your messaging changes, right? If you're building awareness and positive predisposition, it's going to be more of a top of the funnel message. If it's later, then it's more of a bottom funnel message. And then you may dial up or down certain tactics. So lead gen, definitely a big no-no for me. We can use the term demand gen, but I just really think the right term is you're creating demand at all times, especially with brand, and then you're capturing it primarily through digital marketing. And I'm oversimplifying here. And the last point I'll make on this is the 6 Sense buyer experience survey that came out a few weeks ago does a really good job at showing us how ultimately little material influence we have over the buyer wanting to take the meeting. So really what we're doing at all times is we're enabling them with our marketing efforts, with everything they need, so that when they are ready, then they come to us. And hopefully we're capturing them at that moment. So I don't know that this is 100% right, but it's very much been on my mind, and that's how I've started to think about it. Happy to hear your reaction to this.
It's exactly what I try and say to my clients and prospects.
Great.
That unless it's a product that people can sign up for without talking to sales, we're not doing lead generation. And maybe not even in that scenario, it's still maybe demand capture, right? People know they need an inexpensive way to build graphics for marketing, so they're ready for Canva. Yeah. I don't think we're uncovering that latent awareness of that kind of problem either.
Right. And here's my last quick thought on this is, we hurt ourselves by talking about things like lead gen, growth marketing, revenue marketing. Isn't everything we're doing ultimately with marketing to drive revenue? Like, why do we have to separate? But I think when we use all these terms, what happens is we shove brand to the side, and all of a sudden brand becomes this like B word. So it's just one thing. It's the portfolio of everything that we have to offer, and top and bottom funnel. I don't know why we've siloed things so drastically.
I agree with you. So last thing I want to touch on here is if we agree on how we're going to think about opportunity creation and capture, right? Demand generation and demand capture. What does go-to-market get built upon? My view is it's often going to be an account-based marketing kind of situation in an enterprise sale, unless your addressable market is so gigantic, and in some cases that's going to be true, obviously. How do we socialize our recommended plan me thinking a lot of times it's going to be ABM that may not be muscles the organization is used to exercising. They may not have thought about it that way. So how do we socialize these ideas and get the measurement and organizational buy-in to perhaps launch the first real ABM in a SaaS firm?
Yeah, so in my experience, the buy-in is usually there. It's just like the work hasn't happened. I find that it's always been the case. And it's more important than ever now. Again, knowing how harder our job gets and how essentially buyers want to postpone talking to us as much as possible. I think it's crucial to really target the folks that we want to target so that we are starting to create that demand and then eventually capture it, right? So don't waste your time on accounts that don't matter because it's hard enough to begin with. Don't make it harder by going after folks you don't care about, right? So I think the targeting is even more important. And at the basic level, ABM is start with your ICP. So have a conversation, align around ICP, build account lists, and then prioritize them. The high value ones have sales, go after them. Mid value have BDRs, and I would say tier 3 have marketing, go after them. And then marketing is really enabling all the teams through and through across all these tiers of accounts, right? With the right content and the right tactics and so on. I don't think the right ABM or sophisticated ABM approach, in my experience, happens overnight. The right people on the team, the right technology, those two are key. And then time, which is not something most CEOs and most boards like to hear these days.
But I think you're looking for sustainability, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the bloom is off the rose of growth at any cost.
True.
So maybe we need to use different words to motivate more constructive behavior. I'd love to talk more, but I think we need to land the episode here.
Great.
But Isabelle, if people want to reach out to you and gain some of your wisdom and maybe engage with you, how can they reach you?
I would say LinkedIn is the best place. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive with the messaging there.
Awesome. And if people want to reach me on LinkedIn, it's LinkedIn/n/Ken Lempit. My agency to help SaaS firms grow is called Austin Lawrence Group. We're at austinlawrence.com. And if you haven't subscribed to the SaaS Backwards podcast yet, please do so wherever podcasts are distributed. Hey, Isabelle Papoulias, thank you so much for being a guest on SaaS Backwards.
Thank you for having me, and great job pronouncing my last name.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.